So we've got online Xiuzhen Chen, Professor Xiuzhen Chen. She's been setting an exemplary role as a role model, as a devoted nurse for 40 years in nursing. As a nursing expert in respiratory and critical care, she has made great contributions to national and international campaigns of aid, disaster relief, training and developing the nursing services. In 2020, she was among the first on the front line to fight against COVID-19 in both Wuhan and Serbia. She also published articles on COVID-19 in medical journals, including the BMJ, to share experiences with the world. In addition to other roles, Xiuzhen is currently president of the Guangdong Nursing Association and a former vice president of the Chinese Nursing Association. So I very much welcome Xiuzhen to this event. We welcome Professor Louise Toner. Louise is a nurse, a midwife, and an academic. She has a wealth of experience working with the NHS in England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and within the higher education sector. In addition to various roles, she supports education partnership groups to enable universities, NHS trusts, and other healthcare providers to work together to recruit and retain students to facilitate sufficient qualified staff entering the workplace. Professor Paul Coulter is currently working as a consultant in palliative care. He's a medical examiner, he's a CQC specialist advisor, and a GP for the North East Ambulance Service. In addition to these roles, which are so many, he sits on the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh's newly appointed committee. Paul was awarded runner-up for the prestigious Royal College of General Practitioners of Edinburgh Scottish GP of the Year in 2011 and 2012. This year, he was nominated for the Inverclyde Doctor of the Year for his support to training doctors on the front line in COVID. During the COVID pandemic, he has also contributed to the palliative care COVID guidelines in Scotland. Dr. Andy McLeod, up there, is now a consultant geriatrician in the North East of England. She is the former chair of the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh Trainee and Members Committee, who deliver national and international educational resources for the college and represent around 4,500 members. She has helped launch a national trainee engagement programme and new podcast series for the college. She said that my experiences in supporting doctors and students during the COVID-19 pandemic has shaped her understanding of the importance of well-being. Catherine Lamb is a senior lecturer in piano and piano pedagogy at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire. She has established a distinguished profile throughout the UK and abroad as recitalist, concerto soloist, chamber musician, accompanist, and music educator. Catherine is passionate about supporting the resilience of up-and-coming musicians and initiated a unique health and wellbeing programme in 2019, which went on to be selected as a case study for the Healthy Conservatoires Network this year. So, we've got our key themes, and we've said their leadership, we've said it's to do with confidence and resilience, and we've said it's to do with health and well-being. So this is a leadership conference, but I would like to start it the other way round. I would like to start, actually, on the health and well-being aspect. And I would like to put it out to our panelists and just drop in whenever you like. And at the end of, I'm going to break this up into 3 sections. And at the end of each section, I'd like some feedback and contributions from the audience as well. So any of the panelists, feel free to talk about your experiences through COVID-19 and talk about your profession and what you have seen with regard to health and well-being. Before we do that, we are going to actually watch a composite selection of videos by the students. So let's watch that first, and then we'll run the health side.
Provides practical skills, permitting students to apply their knowledge in the real world, aiming for a sustainable, balanced lifestyle with the capability and perspective to be better positioned to self-manage in challenging or stressful situations. By taking this module, I realized that we are all unique. Our personal behaviors, learning preferences, life experiences, and moral compass belong to no one else. By understanding all these key factors, I have a clear version of myself and know how to give full play to my potential. Therefore, in the future, I will try to change the surrounding atmosphere by better understanding and managing the behaviors of myself, my team, and my organization, so as to improve my social skills and the quality of life.
I'd like to say this module was one of the most amazing and wonderful courses I've ever undertaken. It has absolutely triggered my great interest in and curiosity on. I wanted to spend my time learning it, and I'm happy to share some of my experiences with you. Now I can see my inner self in a more natural way, and I have a better acceptance of my advantages and limitations. What's more, I can effectively analyze my behavior and other people's behavioral motivation, so that the emotional needs of such behavior could be better understood and addressed. Most importantly, I've become more confident in overcoming any challenges I may encounter in the future. For instance, even in the tough period of facing the southern coronavirus pandemic last year, my wife and I have reached an agreement on having one more child, and all my family members are supportive of my work in Ghana. This could be mainly due to my effective communication with them.
I am now aware of the 4 rooms, which are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual rooms, and how visiting each of these rooms on a daily basis enables one to build resilience and to cope better with adverse events, and especially during COVID-19 pandemic.
In this module, the IBA 4 rooms helped me to manage my mental and physical health during the pandemic. Moreover, with the learning of the 4 domains, I have gained more knowledge of self-understanding and understanding others. Nurses and doctors are stressed. People are living in fear. They are experiencing many mental and physical problems during the pandemic. Therefore, most of them feel lonely and scared. With the knowledge of the 4 rooms, I have more confidence to help them to balance and manage mental and physical health.
If it is possible, I hope I can organize a multi-century study or international study about the mental health of heart disease patients by using the knowledge I learned from the LBR 7566 module. This will benefit the greater community through strengthening international bonds by means of cooperation and sharing valuable information to each other. This will lead to the improvement of patients' health globally. I gain more from this course than I can say. Therefore, I thank you one more for this invaluable experience. Thank you.
So, health and well-being, let's look at it maybe, Paul, you're right on the front line of all of this. So, talk to me about that.
Yes, I mean, health and well-being, as you know, Adam, has always been important, but it really was pushed to the front during the pandemic, which of course I saw in time how relevant it really was. I work in an area which was the most socially deprived postcode in Scotland, and a COVID hotspot at the time. And I must admit, I just moved up to Scotland, you know. So my resilience and well-being, I had to make sure I personally looked after myself, and I used, you know, the tools that, you know, I had learned over the time to keep me going. What I did notice, though, as time went on, in the sort of pandemic, a lot of my staff, you know, became unwell. Some of that might have been physical, some of that was, you know, mental. And at that point, staff was so reduced that there was actually only me at one point, and this was covering a 24/7 on call, you know. I covered a lot of different areas, and I'll never forget the first day when I went onto the ward, and when I deal with those who can't be, how would I put it, palliative care, depending on your definition, you know, of those who can't be cured. And I saw nurses crying on the ward, which I had never seen really before. And I must admit, what we did very quickly was develop a well-being, sort of like peer support initially, because you had to get in there quickly. And then obviously we worked on what does well-being look like, how do we deliver it. But throughout time, I would just quickly summarise it and by say, when we did put the support in place and dealt with the likes of the 4 rooms philosophy, you know, there's no doubt that the resilience got better and the COVID hotspot settled. And then but we were always a deprived area, so we always lost people young. It was really, really, really sad. However, the second wave, when we went in, I noticed that the nurses were able to deal with things better. The doctors, the sort of the trainee doctors as well, in particular. I mean, you can think about this. You know, that this was the first time they ever experienced anything like that. And I remember, I'll just conclude by saying, I'll never forget, you know, one trainee doctor saying, you know, it's so vital that I look after myself, because if I can't look after myself, I can't look after my patients.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Addy, have we got you back? Shu-Chen, have we lost you as well? Have we lost our China connection? Okay, we'll carry on. Louise.
Can you hear?
Hello, Addy, is that you?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to use headphones because there's a telephone ringing in the background, but it looks like the headphones are slightly
okay, well, we've got your voice, we haven't got your visual, but
there she is.
We've got you, fantastic.
Hello, hi.
I got you again, that's great. So, in view of the student videos, in view of your own experiences, do you want to share anything with us?
So I think, I suppose my reflection on the videos and my own experience is actually the biggest part. One of the big parts in leadership is to actually know yourself and take the time to know yourself, your moral compass and where you come from, and what impacts and influences your decision making first. And I can really relate to that. I started a role at the college with very little leadership training. And I think I spent the first 4 months of that trying to be somebody else, because I had a preconceived idea of what a leader is. And once I relaxed into the role a little bit, and I actually took some help and advice from other people and got some good mentorship, I realised that I could be myself in this role, and I could still lead effectively. One thing I did want to reflect on is the fact that nobody in any of the videos talks about leadership in terms of managing people to meet targets or meeting objectives and things like that. And I think that's really important distinction to make. I think leadership is about is actually about being compassionate to those around you. Lots of the students talk about how by knowing themselves, they were able to empathize better with other people. They were able to recognize emotion in other people and almost kind of coach them through difficult times. And I think that that really is the leadership that we need going forward. And I was so pleased to see that actually predominantly it's what your students reflect having done the course, that it's about emotions and it is about understanding others and communicating effectively with others to actually help other people achieve their potential. And I think that that is the key, one of the key things in leadership that we need to nurture.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Addie. Louise, would you like to add anything to that?
In terms of the leadership side of it, yeah. I mean, I think, Addie, you've kind of encompassed how I feel about the module and the impact that the module has had on the people who've completed it. We've seen people who have been very quiet, very reticent, scared to put themselves forward for anything because they lacked confidence. And by understanding themselves better and their behaviours and how others saw them and others' behaviours, this individual just went from strength to strength and went from being a wee quiet mouse in the back of a ward to now talking at international conferences and things like that. And that's hugely powerful.
That's a good one, because you're talking about the student who had never done a public speaking performance.
That's right.
And then she went on to win second prize in China over something, didn't she?
Yeah, she did.
Because we actually talked, she was able to use that, the content, to actually do public speaking.
And it goes back to what was being said by Paul and yourself, Addie, in terms of the pandemic has changed so many things. But maybe one of the things it has done, and maybe people in the audience will know much better than I would on this, whether as a result of the pandemic, everybody saw each other at their best and maybe at their worst as well, and maybe everybody's a wee bit more open now to working together and to doing things that's about looking at yourself and looking at others, because it's not something we've done an awful lot of, I would suggest, in the health service. And if I think about the amount of money we've spent in the health service in terms of leadership development, I'm not convinced that it's actually done what it needs to do, or maybe we wouldn't still be in the situation that we're in. So I think doing something completely different with a different emphasis, and the module was all about leadership, but the side bit of it, or the added benefit of it, was the health and well-being element. And I think the health and well-being element is kind of Catherine's domain in terms of what you've done in relation to the conservatoire students and how they've progressed as a result of it.
Thanks, Louise. And I think that brings us very nicely, Catherine. Maybe you could talk about the original background of the idea that you had, which then was what you initiate as an idea for musicians. So you're now coming from the perspective of, not from the health point, but the health of musicians. So can you give us a good background?
So here at the Conservatoire, we have students from all over the world. We're studying all sorts of different instruments, have so many wonderful opportunities in venues such as this. And health and well-being for musicians is vitally important. And I think, people generally know the amount of years and hours it takes to train a musician, and our students are musicians long before they come to a conservatoire like this. And they're used to many hours of practice. It takes its physical toll. It can affect, yes, our health and well-being. As a pianist myself, I remember as a student them warning you, the amount of hours you practice on your own, and it's just you and that instrument, or in a small room, you are the instrument. And the other aspect of being a musician is the pressure of performing. Now, there are individuals who come alive when they perform, and it's what they're almost born to do, and it's what they really love. And actually, if we're talking about the pandemic and COVID and what's happened, I noticed with those students and fellow musicians of mine, COVID really hit because the arts sector has suffered so badly during the time of COVID because all our venues are shut, all our audiences. I mean, for me today, it's the first time I've seen an outside audience come in to the Conservatoire, and it's lovely to see it. So aside from our music making internally for our students, we haven't been able to welcome audiences. So yes, as I was saying, for some students and some musicians, they love to perform, and yet there's a whole raft of other musicians who love music and spend all their time practicing and playing. But coming in front of you is something that's quite difficult for them to do. And it's a whole other ball game to being prepared in a practice room and coming on stage. So the idea behind our program, Adam, wasn't it? It's to tackle a number of aspects for our students. It's looking at how to perform at our very best. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all. So our program really starts with understanding who you are. And if I just link that in with COVID, if I'm looking at how different people have reacted, I think the one message I'm seeing from people is we have to be adaptable. So if you're a natural born performer and it's hit you hard during COVID because you can't get out in front of the audience you love, I've been so proud to see our students have taken to new technology and are doing live streamed concerts. And if you're not a musician, you might get quite frustrated with Zoom, etc., etc. Think of our poor musicians. If we can't rehearse online because of the time delay. So organised chamber groups, orchestras, we can't do any of that sort of rehearsal, but they found clever ways to be able to play with others, get recordings done. Other students have actually, and other musicians that I know of, have loved this time of COVID, actually, because the peace and quiet of lockdown, the endless international travel, for example, has paused. People have started new projects. People have been inspired to do something they've had, long wanted to do. And my students, personally, yes, I'm very proud to see. We're teaching on Zoom here at the Conservatoire, and to see some of my students who have been stranded in the UK and can't get back home, and they just have a keyboard, and they're doing fantastic things during all this time.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Can you hear me? Yeah. So thank you for that. What I think I'd like to do is just put any question at the moment to the audience on this section of just health. I know we've merged leadership as well, but anybody like to share a story or anything at this moment in time? Yes, go for it. We just got a mic coming up to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Absolutely wonderful to hear all those different accounts, and thank you for organising this fascinating conference. My name is Michael. I'm from the Royal College of Music, and it's really just a point really targeted at Paul, actually. Paul, as you were speaking, talking about those nurses crying in tears, a really incredible image and stark image, and really helped to put all of us there, I think, with you. And but your leadership really was amazing there. You stepped up, you did the 24/7 call out, and you reminded me, as you were talking, of a captain going through a storm on a ship. And in that scenario, you would want to know that the captain was feeling okay with themselves, regardless of how bad that storm might be. It might even take the ship down, but everybody else on that ship relies on the captain to feel okay with themselves. And I suppose that knowing yourself in that moment meant that you were able to cope, and you were able to represent some type of solidarity throughout that. And I'm just kind of processing my thoughts as I speak here, but I just wondered, there seemed to be quite a lot of fear driving some of the responses, for those nurses. And in that moment, how important was it for you, to know yourself and to represent some type of outward calm even though you were going through the same thing? I suppose that's a question. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Michael. I must admit, you probably noticed a bit of a gulp there with how you beautifully described that. I must admit that is very impressively put. That's exactly what it was like. And to answer your question, I mean, I'll never forget it. It'll last with me a long time. I remember going onto the ward and, you know, feeling these all emotions, and it was driven by fear. It was also driven by folk wanting to do their best and feeling helpless. I think that was the biggest thing, you know. Deep down, medicine and nursing drives you to fix, to cure, and we were faced with an enemy that we couldn't win against. PPE was an issue, our own safety was an issue, our own families were an issue, the fear of dying ourselves, the fear of getting something, all of that. And to answer your question, I remember very well inside feeling my own fears. I'm quite happy to share in this forum, you know, that personal family of mine were shielding at that time, and I couldn't return home for about 2 months or so, roughly, away from my families. And so that was all going on in my own head. But it's interesting you describe it as a captain of a ship, and I might steal that from you, because I used to say it's like a captain of a football team. That was me. And I used to say, you know, even though I was feeling internally my own fears and worries, I had to lead. And I've always said, if I was showing fear as well, then, you know, I couldn't have led that, couldn't have improved things, couldn't have led that team. So inside, fear myself, but I was aware of that, recognized it, tried to deal with it my own way, with all the appropriate tools, and then outwards, leading as I see leadership. And I must say, you know, objectively, you know, what I saw, and subjectively, when we went back to those nurses, they said very similar things to yourself, that they couldn't believe how, when I went down to a one-on-one, I still kept going. And, you know, this isn't about me, but objective facts were there was no one else to lead. I'm a single-handed consultant. You know, so medically I could help lead, and as I say, that's exactly what happened. And I don't think I could have done it 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. But many, many thanks. That was quite moving how you described it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Paul, for that response. I'd like to move on now to the next section. So we've started with health, and I know quite rightly you've got to bring in the other things as well, and the leadership element was quite relevant. But now I'd like to just bring it back to the second item of confidence and resilience. I'd like to share with you some more of the student videos, please.
In the year 2018, I went to study at ECU. At that time, I could hardly balance my work and family life. So I decided to leave my family for the UK, and I undertook a 1-year full-time master's program of professional practice healthcare in the hope of finding a better of myself and improving my personal professional development.
The knowledge I gained from this module will serve the greater community well in my position as a nurse. I can apply the characteristic theories to determine my courage, strengths, and the limitation to help them improve. It will also help me to do patient assessments and enable me to do a better determine how to go about treating my patients.
帮助我去理解身边人的情绪，从而帮助我去不断的改变，去适应和应对生活工作带给我的压力。IBA 课程不仅仅是一门沟通交流的课程，而是通过自我认知、自我管理，通过自己的改变影响着团队，使自己在团队社会中发挥着重要的作用。我相信我会继续运用 IBA 课程所学管理我的团队。
As I have learned, true self-understanding is key to success. The pilot programme provided an opportunity to gain this level of understanding. In my opinion, having now completed the course, it is the most valuable package of knowledge I've ever received in my education. The IBA framework enables you to understand fundamentally who you are as a person. Self-understanding allows you to respond to your behavioural and emotional needs in the best possible way for you. It allows you to predict and prepare for your instinctive reaction in a stressful situation. This knowledge has unlimited scope to be applied to any part of your life, enhancing anything we apply ourselves to, both professionally and personally. As a performing musician, I have been able to use this knowledge and self-understanding to increase my confidence on stage, as well as process and filter critique from others in a far more productive way. Creating music is such a personal experience, and it can be very difficult to deal with negative criticism from others, especially from my peers. The IBA framework allows one to objectively analyse critique, understand why the individual has commented the way that they have, and then decide whether or not their comments are constructive critique and something that I want to take on board for my own musical development, or merely a projection of their own lack of self-understanding. This deeper understanding of where other people are potentially coming from has helped me to avoid any kind of personal or professional conflict over opinions and feedback received.
一些方法，这个方法是关于如何应对特殊患者的。这些方法可以让护士更有效地去理解患者和帮助患者。我相信在以后的工作里，这门课程会对我产生持久的有益的影响和帮助。That's all. Thank you.
So can you just talk to me about the pilot programme at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire and what you felt the final outcomes were when you look at what you think the students walked away? You've got some results there, haven't you? Could you share that?
Absolutely. So one of the aspects we were trying to tackle is increasing our students' confidence and resilience as performing musicians. And as a student at the Conservatoire, you undertake each week performance classes in front of your peers, and you receive critique back from your teachers. You also do performances and exams at the end of the year, and this can be quite stressful for some students. I think one aspect of confidence is needing to practice what we do and gaining that experience, and learning more about yourself and valuing your unique qualities. You can start to get some perspective of being confident about what you can actually do. And I think that gaining perspective was very, very important. The tools and techniques we also walked our students through, we start with what do you need as a performer. So it was lovely to hear from Zach there, a clip from Zach on the video, and you'll hear more of Zach playing later. And he spoke a little bit there about how personal it is to perform as a musician. And amongst musicians, you know, sometimes it's not unusual for people to talk about coming on stage and performing. You give of yourself, and it's almost like they would say walking on stage naked, in the sense that your internal who you are is what you're expressing, and that can feel quite vulnerable to do. So having that innate confidence in who you are, your own musical voice, in what you're saying, these come in time, and our programme helped address a lot of those aspects. And in terms of the feedback we received, we've done 2 pilot programmes now, and of our second pilot programme, we asked our students, did they feel the programme increased their confidence and resilience as musicians? And we were really proud to see that 100% of our students really felt that that had had that effect. So yeah, it was a good programme this year.
Thank you, thank you. So Adi, can I take it towards you? You were talking with regard to leadership and the way leadership should be delivered. What do you think, when you look at the student videos, how would you think about confidence relative to leadership? Just building on what you've said already.
So I think the comments from the video struck me, really stood out to me in terms of as a leader, supporting those around you to refrain failure. Failure is one of the things that absolutely knocks people's confidence, and even the best performing doctors and nurses and students that I've worked with, one small perceived failure can really knock their performance for some time. And so I think it's really important to approach people with kindness and compassion, especially when they are coming to you with their hands up saying, I think I've failed at something. And one scenario that I actually came to mind was I was supporting, so in the UK, we graduated our medical students early during the COVID pandemic. We made them interim F1s and we popped them on the ward. And they did absolutely phenomenally well. And I'm really so proud of how they coped and how they managed. But I was talking to one of the interim F1s who felt they'd failed, and they felt they'd failed the patient because enough. And actually, I sat down with this person. I said, that is a tiny aspect, and I don't think that they didn't recognise the deterioration at all. But we're humans, we recognise patterns. You've been trained a certain way. We've never had COVID before in this country. You've never been to medical school to learn about COVID, and you've not learned actually how quickly people deteriorate. And it's just something that we're all discovering as we learn about this disease. So in that, I reframed what they felt as a failure and looked at their positives and coached them through that. And the next day they came to work and they were performing really well. But I also think it's something we don't discuss enough as colleagues, times that you have failed. And I think sometimes leadership is actually sometimes opening yourself up to be vulnerable and show your vulnerability at the appropriate times. To say, do you know what, you think you failed? This is what I did as a junior doctor, and these are the mistakes I've made, and have that honest conversation. Because I think sometimes, whether it's in medicine or whether it's in any other industry, failure can be a very isolating and lonely experience, and I think we all need to work to change that experience for people, because we're all humans, we all fail. It is not unique to any of us.
Thanks, Addy. I'd like to share a quote by Nelson Mandela, if I may. Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. And I think that sort of ties up with, Addy, what you're saying. It ties up, Catherine, with what you're talking about with a performer. And Louise and Paul, can I now put it over to you, your take on confidence? And maybe Paul first, if you could talk about confidence, then I'll take it to you, Louise, and talk about confidence from what you've seen in the students.
Yes, Adam, I would have to. It's quite fascinating listening to Addy's beautiful summary. I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. She describes how important confidence is. I can only comment what it's like as a doctor, a senior doctor, and in various roles. I took all these roles on because I wanted to make a difference, because I lost my confidence once. And you know, when you lose your confidence as a doctor, you then have to be very careful about, you know, are you safe making decisions? And you're not dealing with, you know, with all due respect, things that aren't life-threatening sometimes, but, you know, so it is really quite serious. And I think, you know, at that time, when I'd lost my confidence is when I started to learn the importance of confidence. And I think we haven't touched on resilience, but I noticed that was part of the question. Resilience is an interesting word, and I was going to say it depends on your definition, because they have at times, there has been times, and I'm sure the reason I say it in this international forum is because sometimes, I remember a psychologist telling me once, oh, Paul, resilience is an organisation's way of taking the blame away from themselves for not supporting people. That has stuck with me for a long time, and that is an interesting thing, because it depends how you define resilience. You can't have resilience without confidence, good confidence, and the way I've looked at that is exactly what Addy has said: compassion. Opening yourself up is something I do very frequently, quite comfortable with doing it, And actually, interestingly, I think that's why I was nominated by this trainee doctor for Inverclyde Doctor of the Year, because when I looked at the nomination, which I was very touched by, it was due to being compassionate, open, and you can do that without, with being still professional. Medicine's an interest, I'm sure it's the same in other industries. Medicine, historically, oh, you are the consultant, you can't, this is how you lead, and things need to change. Louisa, walked it and talked it, and she knows that she's seen it done badly. So I suppose to answer your question, the importance of confidence, I needed somebody to put their arm around me, and I lost my confidence. Nothing to do with medicine, to do with behaviours, other behaviours of others, and it can knock you back quite some way, and that's what Addie did. So I make sure now that I always put the arm around people, I'm compassionate, then that breeds my definition of resilience, which means they can do similar, last longer, well-being, and then ultimately good patient care.
Thank you, Paul. Louise, can you talk to us when we're looking at confidence? I'd like to bring in Paul's word there of resilience as well. What's your take on what we have seen with the students themselves since 2019, of course, when the MSc started?
Yeah, this whole thing seems to have been about 6 years in the development, culminating in the development of the module in 2019. But I think for me the big thing is that because of the students then understand themselves, they do develop more confidence. They are able to take the negative criticism. They are able to think about, is that good? Is that right and justifiable, or is it something that I need to address and do something about? It's meant that people have applied for jobs that they would never have applied for because they've developed confidence in themselves and their own abilities, and maybe not listened to the person that said, no, I don't think you should apply for that now, you should apply for it in, say, 2 years' time. And I think the other bit of it is, it's not just from a healthcare perspective. I mean, was it Zach, the student, the performing student? I mean, he described it beautifully in terms of his experience of it all. But I think if I think back to some of the other things, not just in healthcare, but in education and teachers standing in front of a class of kids, I suppose it's easier in primary schools, quite challenging in secondary schools, or a student healthcare professional having to be assessed in practice and maybe not do as well as they'd thought, or assessed doing a presentation, a bit like a performance. And what this module has done has given them that confidence and has enabled them to use that knowledge and understanding to really change their lives. We actually had one student who really got to grips with the whole self-understanding bit, so much so that the assessment he wanted to do wasn't the assessment that was set for the module. He wanted to explain how doing the module had actually saved his marriage, because he understood himself, how he behaved, how that impacted on his wife, and it actually saved a marriage. I don't think there's many more.
I mean, we were staggered. We were having to explain to the student, look, really, I can present it this way. Well, actually, this is the criteria. Yeah. It's a health-related MSc, and he was arguing, really wanted it. We had to overrule it, but it was a fascinating case. We were slightly jaw open.
Yeah. And I think of another one in terms of school teachers, because Adam did some work with school teachers, and it was fascinating in terms of how children can be labelled. And this particular teacher was describing the behaviours of one of the children in her class who had been labelled and given a particular label. And as a result of the knowledge and understanding of doing it wasn't a module she did, it was some,
we did like the conservatoire, we did a pilot programme in a very difficult school in the UK.
And her view was that child, that is not that child's label, that the child isn't like that. It's how we've just perpetuated what people have told us about this child. And this child had never been diagnosed with this particular condition. And she completely changed her view of what was being told to her about the children in her care, with a really positive impact for those children. And I thought that was quite.
We got some very powerful feedback from that education, that school.
Yeah.
And we will build another one.
Yeah, I think going on to the bit about resilience, I mean, in the health service at the moment and in all walks of life, I think resilience is almost like the key word. I think two of the things to come out of the pandemic is you're muted on Teams and the whole area of resilience. And one of the important things is if you don't build resilience in our students and subsequently in our staff, then we'll end up losing them. And we're already short of nurses, short of doctors, short of a whole range of allied healthcare professionals. And if we don't treat them with care and compassion and put their arm around them and make them feel valued, then people won't stay. People have different expectations nowadays, and they'll go. And I think that's why it's really important that having a different approach to leadership development and what that could actually mean for everybody in that particular organisation. And one of the ambitions would be that we manage to do something in a whole organisation or a whole component of an organisation to make that difference and show what it does.
Thank you very
Addie
much.
wanted to say something.
Addie?
She looked like she was going to say something.
Were you going to say something then? Okay.
No,
so
sorry.
I want to move on now into leadership. If we could run the student videos on the leadership, the final piece.
I began to understand me. Who am I? What is my behavior under pressure? How do others perceive me? And most importantly, how do I tap into my minor domain in order to get along with others and be more effective within my team and within the organization? Just knowing what are their fears, what are their strengths, what are their expectations, enables one to have confidence in self and in others. I now know how to reach an agreement with colleagues in order to get the most out of them. And finally, probably most importantly, my patients can now get a better experience. Junior colleagues can freely utilize my knowledge and expertise. The team works in harmony. The organization flourishes, thus creating a win-win situation.
These skills and ability are helping me in my leadership. I currently am a nurse lead for endoscopy services, which is a really challenging job if you've got a workforce in excess of about 80 individuals. So having to empower, my teams and specialist practitioners around me with their various challenging situation in the NHS. It was very, very empowering to have those tools learned on the AOBR 7566 module. I've also got special interest in equality and diversity, and I was able to pull on some of those tools and techniques as I've been training and discussing and educating colleagues and individuals around relationships and positive cultures and positive environment around inclusion and diversity, and certainly have received some positive feedback on my approach to teaching around the concept of inclusion and diversity as well as well-being.
非常感谢这门课程，让我更了解自己， 并用理解和推动的眼光看待他人的情感和行为，获得有效沟通。欢迎你们加入 IPA 的学习与实践，为管理自己及周围人赋能。
我们医院致力打造于有温度的医院，要求员工把每一位患者都当作亲人看待，以病人为中心，各个方面充分体现以人为本，用人性化设计和亲切温度的关怀来减轻患者从疾病中感受到的压力、恐惧和束缚。所以，在每一个充满人文关怀的医院中，沟通与交流尤为重要。对我影响最大的就是 IBA 课程在情绪管理与沟通交流的作用。我认为 IBA 课程教会我与患者家属及医疗同事用不同的方式进行有效沟通，语间充满了温情的关怀。同事们都夸我站在别人的角度思考问题，说我发生了很大的变化，我之前都没有察觉。原来我已经默默地把 IBA 课程上学习到的知识融入到了日常的工作和生活中。很多患者和同事都喜欢找我倾诉，乐于和我交流，我也为此感到非常的开心。同时我发现工作变得更加的高效和轻松，流程上也更加的流畅，这一切都是有效沟通给我带来的改变。
Effective communication can build up better organization culture and climate. Furthermore, 10 qualities of good leaders, types of leadership, and IBA triangle can help me get positive outcomes of decision making. With the knowledge I've gained during this module, I can help the nurses how to understand themselves and communicate with nurses of different domains. I can introduce the knowledge of leadership and organization to the management department of hospital. Thus, a good environment of working can be created.
优秀的领导能力可以帮助个人和团队获得更强的动力、满足感和成就感。这也让我明白，如果领导者了解员工的行为需求和情绪反应，这将有助于他们设定目标，以及改善患者的安全和提供优质护理。谢谢大家的聆听。
Okay, I'd like to start this one off with a bit of myth busting. So it has often been said in the past that leaders are born, not made. In a speech prepared for John F. Kennedy to be given on that fateful day in Dallas in 1963, he would have said leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. So in the light of the student videos, what's the panel's take on that statement? Can I start with you on that one, Addy, please?
So leadership and learning. I can just repeat the quote again. Leadership and learning are...
So the JF Kennedy speech would have been, leadership and learning are indispensable to each other, but the basic myth that we've all heard about, I'm sure, is that leaders are born, not made.
Yeah. So I would absolutely disagree, and I think that leaders are made, but I think sometimes we confuse positions of authority over us with true leaders. My personal take is that true leaders lead. So true leadership does come at actual quite personal cost to a leader. True leaders are compassionate people I think true leaders, and I've gone through this process myself, and it's something that I picked up with something that Patience said in the video. True leaders know themselves when they are at their worst, and they accept themselves when they are at their worst. And doing that, knowing yourself at your best and your worst, knowing yourself at your worst is a very painful, humbling, can be excruciating experience. But when you go that, and when you accept yourself for who you are as a whole, I think what's born from that is incredible compassion for others. And that doesn't mean that you accept poor behaviours in others, but what it does is it enables you to have a curiosity as to why somebody is behaving badly, or behaving as you perceive in a hurtful manner, or not performing at their job. And you end up seeking a way through with that person. And so
we've lost you there,
true leaders are the ones that will take one-to-one with that person to... So I say true leadership are the ones who approach people with compassion and not judgmental, and actually feel that everybody, you know, everyone is worth their time. They have a curiosity to help people. And so I think that leadership is, I would say a true leader is somebody who knows that their role is to support those around them.
So Adi, are you talking about now, and again, if I could drop this out as well, so are we talking then, if I'm understanding this correctly, leadership is linked to the confidence, the self-understanding and the confidence of knowing who you are? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's knowing who you are in a whole sense. So it's knowing who you are on your best day, and on your worst day, accepting that, but also accepting that other people are that whole gambit as well, and treating them in a really holistic way.
Fantastic. Thanks, Adi. Louise, can I just put to you, with your wide experience in the NHS and all the things you've done through the UK nations, can you just give me an idea of where you think leadership is at this moment in time?
Yeah. I mean, I think you started off by talking about the quotes from Kennedy, and and I think leadership and learning do go hand in hand, because I think as Adi's talked about the fact that you've really got to know yourself at your best, at your worst, etc., and that comes through learning. Yeah, not being born with it. I mean, some people, I mean, you hear people are born presenters or born to be on the stage or something like that. But I think the learning bit of it is absolutely crucial. I think for me, and as I say, there are others in this room far better than I am to talk about this, is that we seem, it's how do we approach leadership training in organisations, and what makes those organisations successful because of the nature of the leadership training that they've done. And the NHS seems to keep reinventing itself in terms of, we're doing, this is the leadership we're doing, and we're all into transformational leadership now, and there's different kind of buzzwords go around. But it's the fundamentals, and I think everybody's said that. All the students in the videos have said the fundamental bit of it all is knowing yourself, and I'm not sure how some of the leadership education that's provided at all levels, particularly in the NHS, actually addresses that. Because if it did address that, I think it would be a very different place. And I think with what's happened in the pandemic and how people have had to work together in the way that they have had to work together, this is an ideal time to actually try and do something about it when people are, because there's been a lot of emotions, there's been a lot of people seeing each other at their best and their worst. Now would be a really good time to do something. And I don't think I've seen anything different in Scotland, Wales, and England, only a little bit in Northern Ireland, but in Scotland, Wales or England. And if you think on it, Scotland and Wales are quite small, and small can be quite beautiful. So the opportunities to do things meaningful there could be, well, everywhere, but I think now's a good time to do it.
Paul, is there any, thank you for that, Lucy. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah.
Because you're in the front end, you are there.
Yeah.
You are sitting dual trained as a consultant.
Yeah, I mean,
as a doctor.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. A way back, 15, 20 years ago, I would have, said that leaders were born. And then I realised over time that of course you can learn and you can develop into a good leader. So that's an interesting way of the way I started, and then over time realised that of course you can. And I've seen that. I always liken that when Michael was talking about, I mentioned about the captain of football teams, my own football team, was,
now you're going to use the chip.
Yeah, well, of course, exactly. Obviously, he'll never be a leader. And our captain is a great leader now. So that's just a wee example in real life of the way things develop. And I've seen people in medicine become good leaders, I have to say, I've worked in every specialty in medicine and surgery, including all the subspecialties in obs and gynae and neonates and peds and everything. And I'm happy to agree with Louise that if you ever Google how many leadership books there are, you're talking tens of thousands of books. And I've been in them all. I've been on all the courses and I've got all the pieces of paper, but none of them told me what to do. And Myers-Briggs...
Do you feel it's the how that's missing?
It's the how. Myers-Briggs, will tell you, will box you into wee tiny bits, of what your personality's like. But actually, loads of people fill these forms in for different reasons and market in different ways for different reasons. And, it's all about... I'm a very basic chap, and I always bring it back to basics. I always say to people, like when you look at in medicine, for example, common things are common. Strip it all back to basics and learn about yourself and learn about how your behaviours impact on others. Compassion, put your arm around folk. To me, that's leadership. It makes people feel valued. When people feel valued, productivity increases, sickness gets less, and there's not. Basically, I've seen no change either, and we need to change because the NHS at the moment, I can only comment on the NHS, but I have spoken to others in other professions and other things that say it's similar, but we need to make a difference, and because, as I say, COVID forced some things, but this is an ideal chance to make a change.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. I'm going to actually ask Catherine now to make a move because you're going to be performing for us shortly. And while Catherine's getting ready with Zach, I'm just going to put further questions out to the audience. Is there anything anybody wants to add or ask our panelists? Anything at all? Yeah, we've got a question here.
Hi, thank you very much. Hi, Professor. This question is directed to Louise. You talk about the current leadership structure or leadership training available in the NHS, and being obviously a leader in the NHS as well, and having gone through a number of modules and reading books and various tools that we taught, I can certainly say until I was on the module, that's probably the first time I actually learned something about true leadership. So thank you very much, Professor Crizzle, and Birmingham City University for the module. What do you think we need to do then to sort of progress and put in a more sustainable or effective leadership training program per se for our teams in the NHS?
I think the challenge is the NHS have got this infrastructure called the Leadership Foundation, who deliver all the leadership programmes. And having talked to them fairly recently about different ways of doing things, whether there's any opportunity to make changes from that point of view. But what you can do is work with champions. So you're in a particular trust, you're a champion, and it's trying to, maybe slow steps. So like if you could sort out endoscopy and have this philosophy within the endoscopy unit and be able to see the difference that's made, and that you said about productivity and people feeling valued and not as much sickness. Students want to come and work there. You've got a waiting list of folk wanting to come and work with you, and that's maybe how we have to start off, to say, look, this is what was done. and this has been the impact of it. Right, shall we try it somewhere else? And if you've got, you're lucky to work in an NHS trust where you've got senior leadership who are quite open to doing things slightly differently. But I think the fact that the Leadership Foundation exists and it's got tiers of education and training from CEOs all the way down makes it quite challenging to break into. So I think you have to just carry on in the background doing what you're doing, and then be able to provide the evidence to see what it actually does and means. And I think the other thing that we need to do is we need to bring our students need to get this experience as part of their courses so that they feel more confident when they're actually going out into practice, and then hopefully we wouldn't lose as many students, you know, throughout the training. So if you work on the students and then you work in, you know, some small areas, and endoscopy is probably quite a good area to think about, and then just provide the evidence to say, look what's happened, especially if you've got some evidence of what things were like before. And I think that's the only way we're going to do it. I mean, we are planning to have another, sorry every time it gets loud, we are planning to have another conference in maybe February, March time that will concentrate specifically on the NHS, and it's getting some of the key people in the NHS at the higher levels to come along and actually listen to the impact that some of this can have, and for them to say, right, we've tried it that way, let's try something different, because all the people that have talked today can't be wrong. I've worked in education for a long time, and I've never seen a module with the impact that this has had on students. I've just never seen anything like it. It's phenomenal, and the work that Catherine's done with the conservatoire students is equally good. And one of the things that we're hoping to do is to be able to provide something to all of our students, not a whole module, but something for all of our students, starting with our very new foundation year students and seeing what difference that makes to them throughout their journey, and then looking at finalist students who are applying to go for jobs and what difference that might make to them, and then roll it out across the whole student population. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely, and I agree. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks, Lynn.
Okay, as we come to wrap up and wind up, before we do, you probably know from the performance or the layout we've set out, there's going to be a performance now, a live performance that you're going to hear. But before we do that, I would just like to express complete thanks to the panel, which we wouldn't have been able to do this without the panel. Oh, we just got back. We're just ending now. I'm so sorry we lost your connection. So thrilled the panel that we got. So pleased that you came today. We have complete thanks to the Conservatoire team here. Could not have done this without you. And of course, more importantly, total thanks to all our students who took part, because without them and without their initiatives and without their ideas, this event would never be taking place today. So as we wrap up, I'd like to invite on Zach Peachy, one of our students at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire, and senior tutor, Catherine Lamb, and Zach will tell you about the piece that they are going to perform.
Good morning, everybody. It's my absolute pleasure to be here to perform for you today. Catherine and I are going to play Lenski's aria from Tchaikovsky's opera Eugene Onegin. Now, this particular aria has got a bit of a sinister story behind it, actually. So, the two main characters of our opera, Onegin and Lenski, it comes to light halfway through the opera that Onegin has been having a bit of an illustrious affair with Lenski's fiancée. In a fit of emotional rage, he challenges Onegin to a duel. Set in 1820s Russia, of course, if there's a dispute, the only sensible thing to do is shoot each other until somebody's dead. So, this opera is his reflection on his life, his love for his fiancée, and his final emotional farewell to the world. As he
waits for his imminent death.